When I was a young kid in the 90s and sites like YouTube didn't yet exist on the internet, I generally relied on Nintendo Power's critic reviews as the only way to know whether or not I should buy a game. However, slowly over the years, I realized that you can't always trust that every review is reliable, now doing my own research instead. I will say, however, Metacritic is an interesting source as it combines several different reviews from various places, and creates one single average score. After doing some research on the site, I got the idea of creating today's video on the lowest and highest rated games for every Nintendo franchise. What I specifically want to see in creating this video is how accurate Metacritic's score is in comparison to the public perception of the game. Oh yeah, and before I get started, my name is Copycat, and if you haven't yet, then please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Nintendo's first home console franchise that really put the company on the map is Mario, who made his mainline debut on the NES in North America in 1986. In terms of the highest rated game in the series, there's actually a three-way tie at 97 out of 100 between Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 and Super Mario Odyssey, all of which I definitely agree deserve to be near the top of the best category. Looking then at audience score to break the tie, those two Super Mario Galaxy titles then take it, with an audience score of 9.1 out of 10 in comparison to Odyssey's 8.9 out of 10. The now defunct gaming website, GamesTM, gave the second Galaxy game a perfect score of 100 while stating, "No matter which side of the gaming coin you come from, this whole universe of planets is the most inventive, exuberant, and yes, fun set of challenges and diversions yet seen in the platform genre. It miraculously outclasses a game, the original Super Mario Galaxy, that many believed could not be bettered, and once again leaves us wondering just how close Nintendo's bar has come to reaching its theoretical peak." On the opposite end of the spectrum, the lowest rated game in the franchise is Super Mario Run, that has a score of 76 out of 100, which was one of Nintendo's weird forays into the mobile phone market that came out in 2016. Now, I never truly liked this game as I wasn't crazy on the fact that you don't control Mario's lateral movement, only really telling him when to jump from platform to platform. The website xgn.nl, which is a Dutch-based gaming publication, gave the game a score of 70 out of 100 while stating, "Super Mario Run is great in its own right, but the high price and lack of offline play options are not to be overlooked. The game is recommended for Mario fans and casual gamers, but don't expect to play it for days on end." I myself would definitely have to agree with this review, as it never felt like the game was awful. I just felt like it sort of cheated players into buying a game just because Mario's name was attached to it. Maybe if this title had more content and got a little bit more creative, then it might get a pass, but in the state we have it in, it deserves to be on the worst rated. I did decide once again to separate Mario's RPG titles from his mainline platforming entries, as they aren't really comparable in many ways, so it makes more sense if they have their own category. That being said, the highest rated of these types of games is actually the original Paper Mario, scoring 93 out of 100, that was released for the N64 in the year of 2000. At the time, I had never played Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, so this was really my introduction into this particular genre, and honestly I fell in love with the interesting RPG elements and unique paper art style that set it apart from other titles with Mario's name. The reviews aren't as outstanding as I might have expected, with critics just mentioning that this game is worth playing if you're an RPG and Mario fan, but of course years later it's now a cult classic, and it's considered by many as the best in the series. Now, the worst rated Mario RPG is of no surprise to me, as with a score of 75 out of 100, Paper Mario Sticker Star deservedly takes that spot. When I bought this game the day it came out and initially played it, I was incredibly disappointed with the lack of innovation and challenge that this title possessed. Never once did any enemy or situation make me feel like they were a challenge whatsoever, resulting in an easy experience that was almost insulting to older Mario fans. Metro Game Central gave the game a low review score of 40 out of 100 while stating, "Paper Mario Sticker Star is a horrible disappointment that not only fails to capture the magic of its predecessors, but seems oblivious to what made them so popular in the first place." Really, what this reviewer is talking about has to do with the removal of certain core gameplay elements, including the staple partner system, the system of getting XP to gain levels, while they also changed the combat system to now rely on the use of stickers found throughout Mushroom Kingdom. In my opinion, this just cheapens the experience that was expected by fans and left them with a game that was way too simplistic. Nintendo's next major franchise they would create is the Metroid series, that made its debut on the NES in 1986. The early games started off as 2D shoot-'em-up platforming adventure titles, where players had to navigate the maze-like worlds while collecting power-ups, solving puzzles, and defeating enemies. This formula continued in the 3D Metroid Prime games that instead used first and third-person perspectives, giving the games a different feel while keeping many of the core mechanics. Now, the highest reviewed title in the franchise came as no surprise to me, as that honor goes to the original Metroid Prime entry that was given a score of 97 and released for the GameCube in 2002. The website GameCritics.com gave the game a perfect score of 10 out of 10 while stating, "Metroid Prime is a shining example of how a video game series can be vividly reborn. While taking an enormous amount of liberties with the original concept, it manages to zero in on the spirit of the Metroid series and hit a resounding bullseye." This can really be said about the Prime trilogy as a whole, as Nintendo did pull the series out from a place where it was almost forgotten, and hopefully things continue when the 4th game is released soon for the Nintendo Switch. The worst reviewed game actually came as a surprise to me, as it's not Other M or Federation Force like you'd suspect, but it's actually the GBA's classic NES Series port of the original Metroid. I do remember when these NES Classic games were released in the early 2000s, and many people's reactions to them were extremely negative. One of the reasons behind this is that there seemed to be a consensus among fans and critics at the time that they wanted to play brand new, fresh titles, and not old ones that have less superior gameplay. This release was also really scrutinized as Metroid Zero Mission had just come out around the same time, and most people pointed to the fact that just for a few dollars more, they can get a much higher quality experience. The next franchise we're going to look at is also one of my all-time favorites in The Legend of Zelda, that all started on the NES in 1986. The highest rated game in the series is also regarded as one of the best of all time in The Legend of Zelda, The Ocarina of Time, that scored a 99. For the younger audience out there, you guys will never understand how revolutionary this title was, as you have to understand that it came out during a time when 3D graphics in games were a brand new idea. Nintendojo summed things up perfectly in saying, what's significant about this convergence of audio, graphics, and gameplay is that you are completely immersed in Zelda's world. Why? Because everything is meticulously thought out. Each character and events plays a role in a storyline that sprawls like a J.R. Tolkien masterpiece. It's certainly the game of the decade. On the other end of things, there's actually a tie between the classic NES Series Zelda port and Triforce Heroes that was released for the 3DS, both getting a score of 73. The former was received the same way by critics as the Metroid entry we just talked about, as at that time, people just did not want to spend their money on something that they already played, which is ironic because we seem to be doing a lot of that lately. Triforce Heroes was criticized as it was released more of a multiplayer title and wasn't that fun to play if you were just playing by yourself. This is basically what every single negative review addressed, which I guess isn't a bad thing, but for a full price game, I can see why people would be a bit upset. Next up, we're going to look at the Fire Emblem franchise that was originally released in Japan in 1990, but wasn't released in North America until 2002. The highest rated game in the series is one that many people I know have always praised in Fire Emblem Awakening for the 3DS that got a score of 92. What makes this entry so great all has to do with it improving on many aspects of past entries in the series, while adding its own unique touches that put it over the top. Games.cz gave the game a perfect score of 100 while stating, "This is a great turn-based strategy game, surpassing not only its blood-related predecessors, but stepbrothers and stepsisters of the Advance Wars series as well. Fire Emblem Awakening is the new benchmark of the genre that is practically uncriticizable. Now, if Awakening is the pinnacle of the series, then Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light is the series' rock bottom, only scoring 63. This is actually the first game of the franchise that was released on the Famicom, but re-released for a limited time on the Switch's eShop in 2020. It was actually met with criticism of being too difficult and confusing for average gamers to enjoy. The reviews years later all note that the game has aged incredibly poorly, and that fans who may not have had the opportunity to play this game when it was first released won't miss out on anything if they skip it. Although I appreciate that Nintendo wanted to preserve the original experience, I feel like they should have added more quality of life improvements to the game before re-releasing it. I can only recommend this for hardcore fans and those who have a great deal of patience for classic game mechanics. Even though Donkey Kong is technically Nintendo's first franchise with the arcade release by the same name in 1981, their first real console release wouldn't be until the SNES with Donkey Kong Country. It was a little bit of an eyebrow raiser to learn that Donkey Kong 64 is the highest reviewed game in the series at 90, as for some reason I just don't hold it as in high regard as some of the other entries. Either way, a lot of the reviews address the fact that the game is almost intentionally made difficult, with GameCritics.com saying that some gamers will feel overwhelmed just as I did on a few occasions, but that's understandable. DK64 was never meant to be beaten in one sitting. Be warned that there is a lot of backtracking involved and it's not for the faint of heart. I guess for the time, this game felt very expansive with many unique characters that you need to switch between to complete different puzzles. In retrospect, it probably wouldn't score that well if a version of it was released nowadays, but for the time it was really pushing the boundaries of what could be done in video games. Now, the worst rated game in the franchise is one that I somehow didn't know about in Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, that was released for the Wii in 2007. I don't know much about this strange racing title, which seems like it's trying to be a mix between Mario Kart and Diddy Kong Racing, but instead of cars, it oddly uses barrels as your main way of getting around. What really caused this game to get bad reviews is that it was originally supposed to be played using the DK Bongos. That was a peripheral that was released alongside the Donkey Konga series, but instead it was replaced with the Wiimote and nunchucks, which a lot of people didn't like. IGN's review pretty much reflects this when they say, if DK Barrel Blast would have been released on the GameCube like it was supposed to, the title might have had a chance at being remotely entertaining. After some serious problems with basic motion controls, the removal of bongo support, even for those already invested in the accessory, and some quick Mii integration, the game has become a garbled mess of slow racing, shallow gameplay, and an overall boring experience. The Kirby series is the next one we're going to look at, which has over 30 games spanning across every single system in Nintendo's history. There's actually a tie between highest reviewed games, where both Kirby Canvas Curse and Kirby's Epic Yarn gain a score of 86, but if you break the tie going off user score, then the latter wins that battle. This game was initially released on the Wii in 2010, and changed many things up greatly, introducing the cutesy fabric-like world, while also getting rid of the usual ability capture mechanic, replacing it instead of having to morph into other objects to complete specific levels. GameTrailers.com gave the game a score of 84 and summed things up perfectly by saying, "It's rare for a visual direction to have such a profound impact on gameplay, but the two are seamlessly interwoven in Kirby's Epic Yarn. It's certainly not one of the more challenging platformers out there, but it's a breathtaking experience nonetheless." I definitely agree with this, as it seems in more recent years that Nintendo was adding unique art styles not to improve the gameplay, but as a gimmick to better sell the game. At least Epic Yarn utilizes its different style, and it all turns out to be a very enjoyable experience. On the worst rated side of things, there's also a tie between Kirby Battle Royale and Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, both with a score of 57, so if we're just looking at the user score, the lowest is the latter. Team Kirby Clash Deluxe is somewhat of an out-of-place entry in the franchise, as it's an action RPG based on getting gear for your party members by battling different enemies or paying real money. To be honest, it's almost impossible to fully progress without paying money for gear, items, and especially gem apples that let you go on continuously without losing energy. This definitely rubbed fans the wrong way, as people would much rather pay a fixed price for a full game with all the benefits than having to pay microtransactions for part of one. Video Chums gave the game a negative review, scoring it 47 while saying, "As a huge Kirby fan, it pains me to say that I'm very disappointed with Team Kirby Clash Deluxe. From the manipulative freemium model, to gameplay that devolves into an annoying exercise of patience, Kirby has definitely seen better days. As someone who's personally played this title and tried it out for myself, I can say I was confused that Nintendo would put this out on a main console and not in the mobile market where garbage like this usually belongs. The next franchise up in this video is Warios, who technically made his debut in the Super Mario Land game for the Game Boy, but would eventually get his own series in Wario Land, and would later transcend genres with the minigame-based Warioware series. The highest reviewed game, with a score of 89, is Warioware Inc. Mega Microgames, the first in that minigame series that was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2003. When this came out almost 20 years ago, it was definitely received as a breath of fresh air, with over 200 fun minigames that come at you in lightning fast speeds, where you simply just use the GBA's buttons. Console Game World at the time gave it a 96, stating, "It's unlike anything you have ever played before. It's simply amazing if you have a Game Boy Advance, and consider yourself even somewhat of a gamer. Go and do yourself a favor. Go out now and buy this game. You'll thank me later." Unfortunately, more recent entries have been viewed as a huge failure, although Nintendo does have a chance of redeeming it when WarioWare Get It Together is released for the Switch later this year. Now, one of these most recent failures is also the lowest rated, with a score of 53 called WarioWare Snapped, that was released as a DSi title in 2009. What puts this game on the lower end of the spectrum is its gameplay, as it awkwardly relies on you using the system's built-in camera to complete its minigames. Unfortunately, this overall is a very clunky experience, compounded with the fact that there were only 20 different minigames, meaning that there isn't much replayability. Albeit, the title was only $5, so I can't hate too much. The next franchise up in this video is Yoshis, who really made his series debut on the SNES with Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Although many titles with Mario's sidekick's name attached to it are on the easier side of things, the games can still be very fun to play, including its highest rated, which is actually a recreation of that SNES title, called Yoshi's Island Super Mario Advance 3, receiving a score of 91 on Metacritic. Although it was very slimmed down in comparison to the original, there was enough new features that it felt like a new game in its own right. And what also helped is that many fans may not have played the SNES Classic, as it came out very late in that system's history. A user named GameCube Lover gave the game a perfect 10 while stating, "This is an amazing port of an instant perfect classic on the SNES. Now you can play almost anywhere, which is an upgrade, and controls are amazing and the graphics are phenomenal. Everything in this game ranges from great to perfect." It does go to show that people did want ported games to replay, but ones that were worth the update, and not stale, older titles that can't be improved. Now, the lowest rated game in the franchise is the strange Yoshi Topsy Turvy, that also came out for the GBA in 2004. Although an interesting concept that used a built-in gyroscope sensor to manipulate the environment you're playing in, it just was an extremely short and bare-bones experience that doesn't offer much of a challenge. The controls were very tough to navigate, which come up in Nintendo World Report's review, where they stated, "Everything about the game feels like it needs more polish, especially the tilt sensor." What could be a very innovative and fun mechanic to add to a platforming game ultimately falls short of its goal and only manages to hamper the gameplay. A franchise that unfortunately has had a history of releasing games that aren't a hit with fans is Star Fox, where without a doubt, the highest rated game at 88 is its N64 entry that was released in 1997. Although the first game on the SNES did sport 3D graphics, the N64 version really upped the ante, offering very realistic feeling gameplay that blew you away every time you loaded up. The shooting and overall controls were considerably upgraded and perfected, which helped when there would be an inevitable drop in frames from time to time. HotGames.com left a strange but true review in saying, "Every target is superbly animated and detailed. Walker droids walk with consummate ease. Meteors float around ominously. End-level bosses look as imposing as they're supposed to. It's all great." The worst reviewed with a score of 67 is Star Fox Assault for the GameCube, that oddly was created by Namco and not Nintendo EAD, meaning that the mechanics people enjoyed in past entries were a bit different. Also, the on-foot sections were incredibly pointless, unnecessarily slowing the game down when fans prefer faster gameplay. A website called Bonus Stage gave the game a score of 67 and wrote, "Everything that's good about the game, flight missions, the refurbished score, stems from the original 3D Star Fox. What Namco tried to do with the on-foot missions makes me wonder why purists are arguing that the series hasn't evolved enough." One of Nintendo's most famous franchises is Pokemon, and that is seen in the absurd 75 games it has released since Pokemon Red, Green, and Blue in 1996. The highest reviewed game in the series is Pokemon X and Y, with a score of 88 that was released for the 3DS. Technically, Pokemon Y received the higher score, although I couldn't really find the reason why, and honestly, if Pokemon games are released in a pair, you almost have to count them as a single entry. The best review I could find was by French gaming site Jeux Actu, who wrote, "Pokemon X and Y celebrate the transition to a full 3D world, and it's a strong success. Kalos is even more alive, gains volume and credibility. The battle improves too. The creatures have never been so real, so well animated. This and only this can make you buy those games. On the other hand, Pokemon is still the same title, and X and Y keep making the gameplay evolve little by little." A bit passionate, but I agree with what they're saying. One of the most out of place, and to be honest, worst games in the franchise, is Pokemon Dash for the DS, which is also the lowest rated with a score of 46. In this game, you need to use the touchscreen to guide Pikachu to the finish line by constantly rubbing the screen. As you could imagine, this will become a very repetitive aspect that honestly doesn't offer up much fun. The difficulty never increases at all, which ends up with the gameplay being very boring. Pal GN hit the nail on the head when they said, "This is one of the worst Nintendo licensed products released in the last few years. We question how this got Nintendo's gold seal." Ouch. One of Nintendo's most successful franchises, especially because of its newest entry on the Switch, is Animal Crossing, where that New Horizons game is the highest rated with a score of 90. This game is a considerable upgrade from the much beloved New Leaf entry, adding shop upgrades, building relocations, more in-depth home customizations, and an intricate crafting mechanic that leads to several cool items and furniture. Oddly, the user score is an insanely low 5.5 out of 10, with an insane amount of 0 scores, where they almost all complain about the game's multiplayer experience, saying that there's almost no point of allowing more party members on your island, as they are very limited in what they can do. Also, you can only have one island per Nintendo Switch console, which doesn't let other family members have their own individual experience. That being said, the worst critic review was from Slant Magazine, which wrote, "By consolidating so much power in your hands, the game threatens to upend the Animal Crossing vision of community and living." To be honest, I don't even know exactly what that means, as it is positive in a weird kind of way. Now, the lowest rated game in the series is the absolutely absurd cash grab that is Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, that received a score of 46 and came out for the Wii U in 2015. Marketed around you buying Amiibos to unlock certain aspects of the game, let's just say fans were not having it. You could play the game without Amiibo support, but certain characters and items won't be present, which is a disappointing feature that's clearly implemented only to make money. Metro Game Central gave the entry a 20 out of 100, stating, "A new low for Nintendo and for Animal Crossing, in what is the least amount of fun you can have with an Amiibo without needing urgent medical attention afterwards." Alright, that's a weird review, I just had to say it, sorry guys. Moving on to Nintendo's multiplayer franchises, starting with Mario Kart. The highest rated game in that particular series is actually very surprising to me, as with a score of 93, it's Mario Kart Super Circuit for the Game Boy Advance. Why this appearing at the top of this franchise confuses me so much has to do with the constant comments I've seen of people saying they consider it as the worst overall game with a kart name attached. Now, I wouldn't give it that level of hate, but at the same time, I do have to say that it's almost uncomparable to the N64 Classic and even the newest Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. For the time though, I do remember it being a must-have on the portable console, and it did bring me hours and hours of enjoyment, especially on long trips or just when I was bored. A user by the name of Mario Fan gave it a 5 out of 10 and wrote, "My least favorite Mario Kart game besides the SNES, but it's an okay game. The graphics are fire. The quality is horrible. The character selection is the same as the N64. The tracks are good, but flat. Mario Kart Super Circuit isn't that good, but it is worth getting to add to your collection." I think it is interesting to look at how well received a game like this one was when it initially came out, and watch how over time public perception can change to the point where people consider it now as bad. On the flip side, it comes as no surprise that Mario Kart Tour for mobile phones is the worst reviewed in the franchise, scoring an abysmal 58. I've talked about this entry many times on my channel, noting its strange controls, lack of multiplayer at launch, and the in-your-face microtransactions that are either subscription-based or in a disingenuous gacha form, which is essentially peddling gambling to children. Destructoid destroys this game with a review stating, "Mario Kart Tour is a blemish on the franchise that shares its name with it. The genre-defining creativity found in past entries is completely absent here, replaced by a hollow experience that is simply coasting on the name and goodwill of games that came before it. I can only hope that this is Nintendo's mobile initiative hitting rock bottom, and that it's all uphill from here, because I can't stand the thought of another one of my favorite series having its reputation dragged in the mud in search of a quick buck." To be honest myself, I'm always surprised to see people defend this title in the comments, but clearly those people aren't the same ones who grew up playing and loving every single entry in the series. Nintendo's next multiplayer-based franchise is Mario Party, that comes out with almost annual entries, where the highest rated is the original N64 title, oddly only getting a score of 79. Playing this board game style title is immensely fun against 3 of your friends, and the minigames at the end of each round up the competitiveness to the point where it almost caused fights. I guess some of the negative reviews stem from it being way less fun when you're playing alone, as you won't have the same experience against the computer AI that honestly was still a pretty new concept in 1999. Nintendojo gave the game a score of 79 and wrote, "Do whatever you can to play this game the way it was meant to be played, with 4 players. The amount of trash talking, cheating, and jinxing provided when you're playing with 3 other people is unbelievable. A great game that pioneers a great new genre." Now, the worst reviewed title is one that I've talked about a lot on this channel in Mario Party Advance that scores 54 and was released on the Game Boy Advance in 2005. This entry stripped away pretty much everything that everyone loved about the previous entries, with the biggest sore thumb being the lack of multiplayer modes, now changing things to a more single-player experience. There are some interesting minigames to be found here, but very little replayability, as after a while it becomes very flat and boring playing by yourself. Siliconers only states truths when they say, "A single-player Mario Party isn't really a party, and there aren't enough minigames to even put this title in competition with games like Warioware Twisted." Probably the most popular Nintendo multiplayer franchise is the character fighter Super Smash Bros., where the highest rated game is a tie between Brawl and Ultimate, both getting a score of 93. Brawl, however, does have a slightly higher audience score, which is actually not something I expected, as I constantly hear diehard fans stating that they're indifferent about this entry. A lot of critic reviewers also pointed out the flaws in the game, like the dull levels, uninnovative changes, and lack of single-player experience, but still gave the game a 90 or above. This is exemplified in Wired's review when they state, "Brawl isn't perfect. The single-player mode isn't as nearly polished and as fun as the multiplayer. The disc is so crammed full of content that the loading times can get annoying, but it's still without an equal." On the other side of things, I guess it's a testament to the series that the lowest rated game is its original, that was released for the N64 in 1999 with a score of 79. Now, the only things that could have caused such a low score are its limited content, including characters, stages, and a single player mode, which would have launched this great game into being amazing. However, I truly do not agree with Electric Playground's review, who stupidly wrote, Super Smash Bros. Is low-grade crap pretending to be a Nintendo star-studded event. Even though it appears to be a culmination of many fantastic Nintendo games, it simply isn't even close to resembling anything remotely good. Oh yeah, by the way, they gave it a score of 20. I wonder if years later whether this reviewer changed their minds, or if they still quite obviously hold a grudge against having fun. The final franchise we're going to look at is Mario Sports Adventures, which range from tennis, golf, baseball, Olympics, and even soccer. Both the original N64 Mario Golf and Mario Tennis are the best reviewed with a score of 91, but it's the latter that has the best user score, and I'd have to agree. I remember playing this tennis game against my sisters when it came out, and having a blast with the simple but addicting gameplay that was both realistic and goofy at the same time. Even though it's a sport that can be easily forgotten, adding Mario characters all with specific skills make things enjoyable, and years later this specific entry holds up when compared to its peers. Years later, Nintendo would release their worst game in this sport, and lowest rated in the franchise in Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, coming out for the Wii U and only scoring 58. I've also talked about this entry at length in countless previous videos, but what makes this game so bad is its removal of certain game modes, lack of fun minigames, and inclusion of an unwanted Mega Mushroom mode which gimmickly makes your character bigger. Atomics gave it a negative review and scored it a 55 while saying, Mario Tennis Ultra Smash is a poor game. Although it's fun and has simplistic gameplay, it doesn't offer anything that goes beyond of what we have saw from the series in the past. It just simply feels hollow, with few game modes and little replay value. Alright, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment below what you thought about it, and of course subscribe to my channel. Also, please follow my Instagram at Copycat Gamer, where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!